A very good morning, all of you. So it's 5 o'clock. Welcome to our 12th day of 21-day challenge. Let's go ahead with today's presentation. We'll have a general discussion and then we'll move ahead with subject discussion. Today's subject discussion, it's going to be a bit elaborate. It's related to certain topics in biochemistry, in specific respiration, and various processes being involved in respiration at cellular level, glycolysis, citric acid cycle, electron transfer chain, etc. We'll try to have an overview, and also we'll look into the energetics of these cycles in the process. So let's go ahead and start our session as soon as possible. So before we start, a very good morning, all of you. It's good to see you all consistently joining at 5 o'clock, which is no easy task. However, if you appreciate the positives of waking up early in the morning, it just makes your job easy, right? So without much delay, let's go ahead with our presentation. So today is day 12 of our 21-day challenge. So we crossed the halfway mark and we are moving towards our goal or target of completing this challenge consecutively, consistently for 21 days. So today's general topic, we'll discuss about resentment. What are the causes of resentment and who is responsible for this? And before we start, resentment means indignation or bitterness, which we feel because we perceive that we have been treated unfairly, and as a consequence, we get angry. A sense of resentment, indignation, bitterness, right? So, having understood the meaning of resentment, let's go ahead. What Maxwell Maltz has to say in his Psycho-Cybernetics. The real cause of resentment. Remember that your resentment is not caused by other personal events or other persons, events, or circumstances. It is caused by your own emotional response, your own reaction to a particular circumstance. You alone have power over this, and you can control it if you firmly convince yourself that resentment and self pity are not ways to happiness and success, but ways to defeat and unhappiness. And then we'll continue this. In creative goal striving mechanism, see, resentment is therefore inconsistent with creative goal striving. In creative goal striving, you're the actor, not the passive recipient. You set your goals. No one owes you anything for that matter, and you go out after your own goals. You become responsible for your own success and happiness. Resentment doesn't fit into this picture, and because it doesn't, it is a failure mechanism. It's as simple as that. We are masters of our own destiny. We get to choose things. We decide what we want. Ultimately, the end of the day. So no one owes us anything. We cannot be angry at someone for something because we set our own goals and we go after them, and we are solely responsible for our own success and happiness. This might seem a bit harsh. This might seem like we are to be blamed for everything, but that's not the point here. When we are in charge of our success, when we are in charge of our happiness, it's a kind of empowerment. Don't you feel empowered when you know that you are in charge of your own journey? So that kind of empowerment gives you the power to choose things in a right direction. So we cannot blame others. We cannot blame other circumstances, right? We are, after all, responsible for our own success and happiness. And if at all there are failures in the process, of course there will be, as we have seen yesterday. And they're only means for us to correct our course and move towards our targets or goals based on our choices. And before I conclude this, you can just see we set our own goals. No one owes us anything, and we go after our own goals, and we are responsible for our own success and happiness. So resentment is in no way going to help us in achieving success. So you've seen frustration, We have seen other negative aspects which lead to failure, and resentment is another factor which plays a very bad role and prevents us from achieving success, right? So with this general discussion, let's move ahead with our academic part. So today's topic, as I was mentioning previously, it's going to be a bit elaborate, right? So we'll go ahead trying to have an overview of various cycles at cellular level, in specific those involved in respiration. So respiration, it's a very simple process. You know what respiration is all about. So we'll start from here and move ahead in a biochemical point of view, right? So respiration, in the process, make sure you have your notes and try to make a note of various important points which we come across in this process of textbook review. So you can see the reference at the bottom of this slide. So respiration is the physiological process that produces high energy molecules such as ATP, energy currency of cell. As you know, these high energy compounds become the fuel for various manufacturing and growth processes of the cell. So respiration involves transfer of electrons in a chemically linked series of reactions, and the final electron acceptor in respiration process is oxygen. That's the reason why this is considered to be aerobic respiration, not anaerobic, right? It's another important point which I wanted to highlight. So thus, respiration is obviously important because there is generation of ATP, which is essential for our survival, without any doubt, right? And I wanted to highlight or make a note of this final point. That is, the final electron acceptor in respiration process is oxygen, which will come across again in electron transfer chain, right? And for this reason, it's considered to be aerobic respiration. So respiration occurs in all types of organisms, including bacteria, protists, fungi, plants, animals. And in eukaryotes, respiration is often separated into three separate components. The first is known as external respiration and is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between environment and organism, that is breathing, which we practiced thoroughly last Sunday, conscious breathing, right? And the second component of respiration is internal respiration, which is exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the internal body fluids, such as blood and individual cells, which we have seen in physiology. Thirdly, there is cellular respiration, which is a biochemical oxidation of glucose and consequent synthesis of ATP. So that's going to be our focus in the next few slides, right? So very simple. Now, cellular respiration in prokaryotes and eukaryotes is similar. Cellular respiration is an intracellular process in which glucose is oxidized and energy is used to make high energy ATP compound. ATP in turn drives energy requiring processes such as biosynthesis, transport, growth, and movement, ultimately survival. In prokaryotes and eukaryotes, cellular respiration occurs in three sequential series of reactions, starting from glycolysis, citric acid cycle, and electron transport chain to synthesize or to form ATP from glucose through process of respiration. And in prokaryotes such as bacteria, respiration involves components that are located in cytoplasm of cell as well as being membrane bound. That's in case of prokaryotes. So glycolysis, we'll start with this, glycolysis. So what exactly is glycolysis? And we'll try to have an overview of the same. Glycolysis is a controlled breakdown of sugar, predominantly glucose, which is a 6-carbon carbohydrate, into pyruvate, a 3-carbon carbohydrate. This is very, very important. Pyruvate is formed under aerobic conditions. Under anaerobic, lactic acid. Okay, so we'll get back to that again. So glycolysis is controlled breakdown of sugar, especially or predominantly glucose, a 6-carbon carbohydrate, into pyruvate, a 3-carbon carbohydrate. So organisms frequently store complex carbohydrates such as glycogen or starch and break these down into glucose that can enter into glycolysis subsequently. The process involves controlled breakdown of 6-carbon glucose into 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvate. As an overview, at least 10 enzymes are involved in glucose degradation. The oxidation of glucose is controlled so that the energy in this molecule can be used to manufacture other high energy compounds such as not just ADP, which is formed through substrate level phosphorylation, but also NADH. Two NADH are formed, if you remember, from one glucose molecule. We'll get back to that. So the oxidation of glucose is controlled so that the energy in this molecule can be used to manufacture other high energy compounds. Each round of glycolysis generates only a small amount of ATP in a process known as substrate level phosphorylation. If you remember, 4 ATP are formed. We'll discuss the energetics at the end of this presentation, so don't worry even if you're having no clarity in the numbers. Don't worry at all. We'll give you clarity. So 4 ATP are formed as a process in which two are utilized back. So substrate level phosphorylation, there is net gain of only 2 ATP in glycolysis from one molecule of glucose. So for each glucose molecule, this is what we're discussing now, that is broken down by glycolysis, there is net gain of 2 molecules of ATP. You can make a note of it. And glycolysis produces reduced nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, that is NADH, which is a high energy molecule that subsequently enters into electron transport chain where we can form ATPs, right, to make ATPs in electron transfer chain. So for each glucose molecule that is broken down by glycolysis, there is net gain of 2 molecules of NADH. So consider these 2 points very, very important, which you find in this slide. So for each glucose molecule, there are a formation of 2 molecules of ATP, net gain of 2 molecules of ATP through substrate level phosphorylation, nothing to do with electron transport chain, remember. And also there is net gain of 2 molecules of NADH. Finally, glycolysis produces compounds that can be used to manufacture compounds that are called fatty acids. Fatty acid synthesis, right? Fatty acids are major constituents of lipids and are important energy storage molecules. Now, let's move on. Now, after formation of pyruvate and then it enters into citric acid cycle, let's have an overview. Each pyruvate molecule is oxidized to form carbon dioxide and acetyl-CoA. So carbon dioxide, only 1 carbon molecule, acetyl-CoA, 2 carbon molecules. So cells can also make acetyl-CoA from other sources such as fats and amino acids. Indeed, this is how cells often derive energy in the form of ATP from molecules other than glucose or complex carbohydrates. So acetyl-CoA, which is formed from pyruvate, enters into a series of 9 sequential enzyme catalyzed reactions known as citric acid cycle. So these reactions are so named because the first reaction makes 1 molecule of citric acid cycle, a 6-carbon molecule from 1 molecule of acetyl-CoA and 1 molecule of oxaloacetic acid. I'm sure you remember. A complete round of citric acid cycle expels 2 molecules of carbon dioxide and regenerates 1 molecule of oxaloacetic acid. So it goes on and on. And if you look into the dynamics of this cycle, like how many ATP or how many NADH or FADH are produced, you can clearly see 1 glucose molecule produces 6 molecules of NADH and 2 molecules of FADH. We'll look into all of these in the form of a table at the end of this presentation, as I mentioned prior. The citric acid cycle produces 2 high energy compounds, that is NADH and FADH, reduced flavonoid dinucleotide, that are used to make ATP in electron transfer chain, mitochondria. So 1 glucose molecule produces 6 molecules of NADH and 2 molecules of FADH2. The citric acid cycle also produces guanine triphosphate, which is a high energy molecule that can be easily used by cells to make ATP. Ultimately, we're all talking about ATP, the energy currency of cell. So this is by a process known as substrate level phosphorylation. Finally, some of the intermediates of citric acid cycle reactions are used to make other important compounds, in particular amino acids, nucleotides, etc., which we discussed already in e-classes. And then we'll just move on from here. So from citric acid cycle. Now, the final phase in respiration is electron transfer chain, which is a final series of biochemical reactions in respiration. The series of organic electron carriers are localized inside the mitochondrial membrane of eukaryotes and the single membrane of gram-positive bacteria or inner membrane of gram-negative bacteria. Cytochromes are among the most important of these electron carriers. Like hemoglobin, cytochromes are colored proteins which contain iron in a nitrogen-containing heme group. So iron. So element which is present. The final electron acceptor of electron transfer chain is oxygen, which produces water as a final product of cellular respiration. You can make a note of this particular point, right? So the final electron acceptor is oxygen, which forms water, which is a final product of cellular respiration. The main function of electron transfer chain, I think this is the final slide or a penultimate slide. You can see 32 molecules of ATP from one glucose molecule in the entire process. Again, we'll get back to that table. The main function of electron transfer chain is synthesis of 32 molecules of ATP from control oxygen out of 8 molecules of NADH and 2 molecules of FADH. If you remember, out of these 8 molecules of NADH, 2 are coming from glycolysis, 6 from citric acid cycle, and these 2 FADH are coming from citric acid cycle again, right? So made by oxidation of 1 molecule of glucose in glycolysis and citric acid cycle. So ultimately, from 1 molecule of glucose, we are getting 32 energy currencies of cell, that is ATP. The electron transfer chain slowly extracts energy from NADH and FADH2 by passing electrons from these high energy molecules from one electron carrier to another as if along a chain. As this occurs, protons are pumped across the membrane, creating proton gradient that is subsequently used to make ATP by a process known as chemiosmosis. Do underline this particular point, right? So previously ATP generation in cycles, we are calling them as substrate level phosphorylation. Here, we're calling it as chemiosmosis. So respiration is often referred to as aerobic respiration because the electron transfer chain utilizes oxygen as final electron transfer, as we discussed in the beginning. When the oxygen is absent or in short supply, cells may rely upon glycolysis alone for the supply of ATP. If you remember, we talked about pyruvate initially in absence of oxygen. It is formation of lactic acid and only formation of 2 ATP, right? So glycolysis presumably originated in primitive cells early in the Earth's history when very little oxygen was present in atmosphere, right? Survival mechanisms. The glycolysis process has been referred to as anaerobic respiration, although this term is little used today to avoid confusion. And before we conclude the academic part, this is a summary of ATP generation in glucose metabolism, reference being U. Satyanarayana, our professor. So you can see glycolysis, various enzymes for ATP synthesis and also the number of ATP synthesized. The one in red are based on U-PO ratios. I suggest you remember both the values. So total ATP per mole of glucose under aerobic respiration, 38. According to latest PO ratios, it is 32, as we have just seen. So in glycolysis, if you observe, there is net formation of 2 NADH and 2 ATP, right? And citric acid cycle, 6 NADH and 2 FADH. You can just count for yourself. So total ATP per molecule, per mole of glucose under aerobic condition is 32 as per new PO ratios, right? So we can just make a note of it, memorize this, and we just had an overview. And once you remember the number of ATPs, number of FADH, number of NADH produced, it's easy for you to get to this final number. Because as you can see, it's 2.5 for NADH and 1.5 for FADH, right? So number of ATPs formed from these high energy compounds, okay, as per new PO ratios. I'm telling you very frankly, I don't know whoever told us that biochemistry is very challenging, biochemistry is very boring, completely wrong. It's a lie. If we understand and correlate this process at a practical level, it's very, very interesting. In fact, it's one of the very, very interesting subjects. I understand that it's a challenge to remember all the enzymes, which through repetition and by utilizing these early morning hours, we can master the same as well. See, once we have an overview, now we've seen what respiration is all about, why it's called as cellular respiration, aerobic respiration, different levels of respiration, and at cellular level of respiration, why there is glycolysis, why citric acid cycle, why electron transfer chain, what is that we're trying to ultimately achieve in the process. So, very, very interesting phenomenon, which is happening right now as we're all living, as we're all alive. isn't it? Only thing is that we are not able to see it with naked eye. But if you're alive, it's a justification and it's a proof of concept, isn't it? So I suggest you to get back through these topics once again. Once you're done with this live, once we conclude this session, I suggest you to go through this literature review once again. First of all, try to get an overview of all these cycles. Then it removes all the fear which might be there because of the kind of conditioning we received right from the beginning. So once you overcome that fear by understanding, by having an overview of these cycles, by having an idea on rough estimate of these energetics, you'll gain some confidence. And once you start entering or digging deeper, it just makes your job easy, take my word. And along with this, also look into various rate limiting enzymes, which we already discussed and posted a separate PDF on the same in e-classes. So that's how you can enjoy, not just biochemistry for that matter, any subject, right? So with this, let's conclude. And before I conclude, we'll have a summary of all that we discussed so far in under a minute. So initially, we have seen about resentment, right? So resentment, bitterness, indignation, or feeling of anger, because you perceive that something unlawful, or you've been at the receiving end. So can we use that resentment or self-pity to succeed? Not at all. They're not going to help us in any way. They're only going to make us unsuccessful and unhappy, as we have seen. So we are responsible for our own success and happiness. We are in charge of our own destiny. We get to choose, no matter how much others force us. Ultimately, it's our choice. We are responsible. Having said that, doesn't mean that we are to be blamed for our failures. So that's not the point. When we are in charge, I'm driving a vehicle. When I'm in charge, I get to go to various places based on my choice. Isn't that an advantage? Come on. So when we are responsible, it's a sense of feeling of empowerment, right? Success and happiness will be all ours without any doubt. And also we've seen about respiration, various phases of respiration, various levels, and also various phases in cellular respiration, including glycolysis, citric acid cycle, electron transfer chain. We just had an overview, and also we had an overview of the energetics of these cycles and the number of ATP that are formed ultimately from one molecule of glucose. Okay, so with this, let's conclude our live session. I know early morning, these topics might be a bit challenging, but once you start entering and going through them, it's going to be very easy and enjoyable. Okay. So I hope it's clear. And if you need any further clarification, of course, you can get back through mail 24/7. And also regarding external carotid artery, we're working on the key points, and we'll get back to you through mail. Most of you have sent your illustrations through mail. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Just give us at least 24 to 48 hours time, right? So wish you all a fantastic day ahead. Love you all. I just can't stop myself from saying this, but waking up early in the morning, it's just making my life even more amazing. Today I set my alarm at 4 o'clock. I slept by 9:15 or 9:30 again last night. I set my alarm at 4 o'clock, but I could wake up even before 4, around 3:40 or 3:45. After waking up, the kind of freshness you feel. Of course, you have to brush your teeth. The kind of energy you receive from this particular time. I mean, it's magical. Believe me when I say this. So it's an amazing experience that I've been experiencing on day-to-day basis. I'm sure you are as well. But having said that, make sure you're having good night's sleep. And before you sleep, whatever dinner you have, make sure it's a lighter, okay, not heavy food, because again, it takes there is a lot of strain towards digestion, and you'll not feel energetic and enthusiastic the moment you wake up. So light food, preferably add some fruits, uncooked food along with your regular food. Try to complete your dinner sooner, 8:39. I had my dinner by 8:30. I slept by 9:15. I woke up by 3:30 or 3:45 around that time. And I'm getting plenty of time for myself to do various activities throughout the day. It's more than amazing. Take my word. I mean, I cannot stop myself from saying this, even though I say the same almost every day. But I'm not going to stop. because this is magic which I have been experiencing, and I want you guys to experience as well, genuinely. Right? Have a fantastic day ahead. Love you all.